And a blessed morning to you all and a happy Sabbath, not only here in southeast Queensland, Australia, but wherever you are in the world. We've survived to some degree this Alfred typhoon. It was certainly a very wide one. It made itself known. A little bit of like our politician, sort of from the one moment didn't know what the next moment brought. But yeah, anyway, so there's a lot of cleaning up to do. We're starting with refreshed energy. We're got a big ball of fire up in the sky, and I think they call it the sun. I haven't seen it for a while. But anyway, we'll start off on a positive note. And I've got a bit of a, how to say, encouraging introduction story, I suppose, before we start. But we'll ask God's blessing on it, and may I be his mouthpiece. Our Lord, loving Father, we thank you so much again that it's Sabbath and that we can come to spread your word and encourage those that have been hurt and abused and wrongly accused and all that sort of stuff. It always hurts, but help us to be good disciples. And we're getting some new members this morning too at our meeting, so that's great. And we can certainly do with a extra few foundation members. And we ask for your understanding and let the Holy Spirit guide you. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Also, again, I will reiterate, please take note, because you say, well, you'll remember, but there's quite a bit of information this morning. We got two transmissions. First off, about Revelation Reveals Antichrist by Doug Bachelor, and then we have a bit of a furlough, a bit of a break, stretch your legs. And after that, we got Walter Veith, a South African professor, and he'll give us how would you say, a deeper view of things. And at the end of it, instead of putting the lineage about 3 or 4 minutes to give you a bit of information as to what happened with the Reformation in Europe when it first started, and it was certainly getting a fair bit of lacing and how do you say, backwards energy from the Catholic Church at the time. But because of it wasn't my idea, but I reckon it was better to put it at the end, because a lot of people are not really interested in it. Well, I am, as to where we are today, dependent on what happened in those days, and they called it the lineage. Out of the lineage came Martin Luther time, quite a few of the tentacles of the Reformed view on the Bible. And the more you go into it, the more you be, how do you say, aghast of the development. And then when some of the Puritans in the south of the Netherlands got well and truly sick of it, they went to the New World, New Amsterdam, which is New York now, and they started off afresh. But the thing is this, they took the trouble with them. So it is very important to be educated and take note, look it up, and if there's anything that you can't understand or want to discuss, please get on the internet or even phone me up. You'll look at the site. I'll keep the Sunday markets going as long as I can, but I'm being a little bit hampered with upcoming replacement of my right hand hip, and three discs of my spine below are totally smashed, and my right knee is also crooked for the last 30 years, but I'll just keep on going and keep on smiling. We'll see what happens. And the quicker I can get some capable people to fill in for me while I'm, how do you say, laying on my back and enjoying things in a hospital. I would like to keep this going as long as possible, and also the Sunday markets, because I myself am learning a lot on the Sunday markets of all the different things that are happening in other churches. It's quite interesting. Anyway, we'll start off with the reading. Inner strength for daily life. Now you can pray about strength, Lord give me this, Lord give me that, but half the time the Lord has already given it, but you're not using it. And I think this is, it needs an awakening. You've got to be able to have a look in your own mirror and see, what am I doing? Am I just sitting there and waiting for the Lord to do it? Or is the Lord giving me a chance to do it and then get off my backside and help others? There's no better joy, and you learn a lot more too, to reach out. Sometimes the very closest person, good morning, is not a member. Good idea, we're in the broadcast at the moment. It's all right, take a seat wherever you like. And we'll introduce you in a minute. If you want to, just on the side, there's a little notepad there that if you want to take any notes, that's all right, gravity sucks. Okay, anyway, we'll start off. Inner strength, as I said, that we can go to university and learn psychology and human management, etc. But unless you actually put it into practice, it's not going to happen. The one hand has got to wash the other hand, and this is in true life too. So anyway, inner strength for daily life. Just imagine you have a test or an exam coming up and feel nervous. Yeah, I know all about that too. You feel sick in the stomach, and you feel weak and powerless, probably even buckling at the knees, who knows. And when I first applied for SAS selection, I felt just so, or such, whatever. One of the officers I met told me that everyone who attempts selection has the basic mark: one body, two arms, two legs, and one head, and one pumping set of lungs. What makes a difference between those who take it and those who don't is what goes on in here, he said, touching his chest. The heart, that is what makes the big difference. Only you know if you got what it takes. And the willpower, of course, too, the determination that comes from within your ears, but you've got to use it wisely. That's why the head office is put on top of the factory. The only qualification I needed was a beating inside of my chest, the heart beating. It is also called the fire inside, grit, guts. And German expression I found very, very fitting is Ausdauer. Ausdauer is like push from within, or spirit. In the following months, I had plenty of time to find out just how much of that I had. Selection starts with a series of intense physical tests to weed out those who should not have even bothered applying or did not have the determination. And that's what I was said in the beginning. God gives you the chance, but unless you get off your butt and do it, nothing's going to happen. You can take a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. The long day and the night's marches across the mountains, carrying a heavy backpack, your weapon, webbing, and always against the clock, the weather, the terrain. Just go back a little bit, the webbing, the terrain, and your own doubts. The 2-minute no holds barred boxing rounds, the endless pull-ups and press-ups, and the lung-busting uphill runs, very often carrying another recruit in a fireman's life grip, like they put them around the shoulders and they hold them and go hell for leather. Pushed as hard as we often, vomited, or in Australia you say puked. Worst of all, I will never forget the dawn Bergen bashes. Now Bergen, I'll explain that in a minute, which were fast runs through the mountain forestry track, and a full kit and pack, or a bergen, that's your full back, or here you would say rucksack or whatever. When we were already exhausted, tired, and soaking wet, blisters on top of blisters, you were only safe if you gave 150% of yourself and stayed near the front and never gave up. Well, it didn't get any easier. If I wanted to make the grade, I had to push myself harder each week. But gradually, something inside of me changed. I was learning to get used to the pain. I was learning what determination looked like and felt like. I was learning to ignore the temporary pain. And you can, by the way, what I'm just reading, you can fit that to your mental determination, obviously. I was learning that determination looked like, and what it looked like and felt like. I was learning to ignore the temporary pain and focus on the long-term gain, the goal. And this is mentioned in scriptures too. It's the goal that we've got to keep our eye on, as we should in other areas. And years later, I'm grateful for those lessons, and I'm still learning. Well, I'm 83 and I'm still learning also. As life, now I'm 38. As life is a lifelong lesson, but to keep going in your strength will always be finite and flow. The key to enduring for me was to knowing that I had a reservoir of God-given, refreshing, living water to draw on inside of me. The knowledge that however tired or lacking self-belief, I felt that there was a presence beside and within me that was and is urging me on, helping me to stand and keeping me moving to the goal that God created us for. This presence asks nothing in return. It is strong, it's good, it's rooted in love, and we are created with a free will, which is awesome. It's an awesome responsibility for each of those that choose the right way. If you choose the wrong way, well, you'll soon find out. I think there's a saying for that, yin yang or something like that. Like a parent to a small child, cheering us on and guiding and protecting our steps. Even when that child makes a stumble, he or she gets up and tries better. I always knew that this presence was there, and it was never, and it's never left me. Some call it the God and Spirit within me. Some call it God, some call it universal force, some call it power or love. But you know what I'm talking about, and you know what you got yourself. Jesus lived in that force and shared it all day, every day. He said he is that force. John 14:6. I am the way. I am the way and the truth and the life. There was a spelling mistake in there. I've got to learn to type. And I have learned through a life of adventure that his promises for our lives and our future holds true. How we respond and be steadfast to the promises of Christ over our lives changes everything. It doesn't have to be religious or loud, or it's in the opposite. Raw faith is often raw, honest, shines bright in our struggles and failings, and will never let us down. Take heart. Our journey of faith is just getting going, and we have the ultimate power and a loving, caring friend with us. Pray daily and never give up, and help those downtrodden, prejudged, and treated with disdain, falsely accused, the sick, the elderly, and particularly the misinformed, and there's millions of those. Satan works hardest within the religious organizations and Sunday clubs. I hope it all sinks in. It's quite a bit to chew on. But yeah, look it up, and if there's any comments, please contact me or by email or even by phone. If you're in Toowoomba, come and see me on the Sunday markets as well. It's good. And we'll go straight into Doug Bachelor's presentation of Revelation Reveals the Antichrist by Doug Bachelor. Okay, thank you very much and God bless you.
Let me tell you why we should be studying this subject. I'm going to quote to you from Revelation 14, verse 9. You'll have these scriptures on your screen up there. Then the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast in his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or his hand, he himself shall also drink the wine of the wrath of God, that is poured out without mixture, in full strength, into the cup of his indignation. And he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends up forever and ever, and they have no rest, day or night, who worship the beast in his image." That's very interesting. In our last presentation, we talked about one of the commandments that revolves around worship and rest. What commandment is that? It's the fourth commandment, dealing with the Sabbath. Those who worship the beast do not have rest. Jesus said, "Come unto me and you'll have rest." The Sabbath is all about rest in the Lord and peace. You notice the most fearful curse pronounced in the New Testament, maybe the whole Bible, is pronounced on those who worship the beast, who worship the Antichrist and receive the mark of the beast. So what do you think? Is it important for us to understand this? If we're going to understand the mark of the beast, then we need to understand something about who is the beast, the Antichrist of Revelation. It says, "Whoever receives the mark or the number of his name." Now, if you look, I don't know if you have a Bible, but I'll read this to you real quick. In Revelation chapter 13, we always think about the mark of the beast. In reality, you'd have to say the mark of the beasts, because in Revelation chapter 13, it talks about two beasts. In chapter 1, it talks about a beast that comes up out of the sea. And then in chapter 11, it talks about a second beast. Chapter 1, Revelation 13, "I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising up out of the sea." Then you go to verse 11. "I saw another beast coming up on the earth." Two beasts, one out of the sea, one out of the land. These beasts work cooperatively to make this one world worship a mandate in the last days. And you know, we're moving towards that. Something happened in the news today, I saw, here in your country, that is another sign of that. Now, to understand what these beasts mean, you really have to start with Daniel chapter 7. This is one of the first places where the Antichrist is a prominent prophecy. In Daniel chapter 7, it talks about these four beasts that come during this vision that he had. And it all plays into Revelation 13. If you're going to understand Revelation, you've got to start with the foundation in Daniel. Daniel chapter 7, first verse. I'm going to be reading a lot of this. It will not be on the screen. "In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and the visions of his head while on his bed. Then he wrote down the dream, telling the main facts. Daniel spoke, saying, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. That great sea of the Mediterranean it's speaking of, not to be confused with the Sea of Galilee or the Sea of Tiberias. And four great beasts came up from the sea, each different from the other. And then I'll quickly go through this. The first was like a lion, and it had eagle's wings. I watched till its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Suddenly another beast, the second like a bear, who was raised up on his side. Matter of fact, I got a little picture here, something for you to look at while I'm reading this. If you're like me, it's easier for you to visualize these things a little bit. Another beast like a bear. It was raised up on one side and had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And they said thus to it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I looked, and there was another like a leopard, which had on his back 4 wings of a bird. And the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. Now here's the 4th beast. Pay special attention, because he reappears in Revelation 13. And after this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, exceeding dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring and breaking in pieces and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I'm going to jump ahead here and just look, for instance, the angel comes now to translate the vision. And he said, Daniel's really concerned about the 4th beast, because he really persecutes God's people. The 4th beast shall be a 4th kingdom on the earth, which is different from all the other kingdoms. He'll devour the whole earth and trample it and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns are 10 kings who will arise from this kingdom. And another will arise after them. And he's different from the first ones. He'll subdue 3 kings, and he'll speak pompous words against the Most High, or blasphemous words. He'll persecute the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And the saints will be given into his hand for a time, a times, and half a time. And chapter goes on. I like to just read through it, but I don't have time to do that. Matter of fact, I'm going to talk fast. I'll sound like one of those tape players. The speed has been changed a little bit tonight, because I got a lot to cover with you in a short period of time. Okay, so if I talk fast, will you try to listen fast? Okay. I think everybody knows the most populous country in the world is China. When I was there, which a couple of years ago, they told me it was about 1.3 billion people. Do you know the population of China today is greater than the population of the entire planet 150 years ago? Isn't that something? But did you know the smallest country in the world with the smallest population is actually Vatican City? According to the Lateran Treaty in 1929, that 90 acres there around Rome, on the outside of Rome, is an independent country called Vatican City. And in that city, they've got their own currency. This papal currency, it's equal to about a lira. They've got, the Pope is the final authority. He's the head of the judicial system and leadership in every way. They've got their own postal system. They got their own magazine. They got their own radio station. They've even got their own little train. They've got their own army. It's called the Swiss Guard, which is also the police force. And ambassadors from around the world, including the United States, go to the Vatican. But I thought it was just a church. Why do they have ambassadors from Australia and the US and all these different countries to the Vatican? Because it's not just a church, it is a political power, it's an independent country. It's very interesting. I've been to Rome before, and it's quite something to see. Number 1, let's go through our questions. Now, these are long questions, so listen carefully. In Daniel chapter 7, we see 4 beasts coming up out of the sea. In prophecy, what does a beast represent, and what does the sea represent? So when we talk about the Antichrist or the beast of Revelation, or the beasts of Revelation, and these beasts in Daniel, as we talk about these powers, what are we talking about? Is it some Godzilla in the last days that's going to rampage around the planet? No. These beasts represent political powers. You read in Daniel 7, the fourth beast shall be the fourth what? What's it say? Kingdom. They represent kingdoms. So we're not trying to be, when we talk about these beasts, we're not trying to be derogatory. This is how Bible prophecy refers to kingdoms. And we still do this today, at least in our country. When we think of the bald eagle, we think of the United States. If we say the eagle and the bear are having a meeting this week, we're talking about Russia and the U.S. If we said the eagle and the kangaroo are having a meeting, I think that's you folks, isn't that right? Now, what are the waters? So these beasts represent kingdoms, countries, powers, okay? The waters that you see, and the answers I'm giving you, you notice there's references, and they'll be in your notes that you pick up tonight. Revelation 17:15, the waters are people and multitudes, nations and tongues. So the waters represent multiplied places where there's great population, multitudes of people that these nations rise up out of. Question number 2. 4 beasts of Daniel chapter 7 represent the 4 world kingdoms. In Daniel chapter 2, verse 38 and 39, it tells us that Babylon is the first kingdom represented as a lion in Daniel chapter 7, verse 4. If you were here the first night, you remember I showed the metal image. That top kingdom was the kingdom of Babylon. What does the eagle wings mean? It has nothing to do with the U.S. And what do the 4 winds of verse 2 represent? All right, we got 2 questions there. It says this lion had 2 wings like an eagle. The eagle wings represent the speed with which it moves. And there's verses in the Bible for this in Jeremiah 4:13 and Habakkuk chapter 1, verse 6. The wings represent the speed with which these countries conquered and they grew. And it tells us what the winds represent, that we're striving on the sea. In the vision, winds represent strife, commotion, destruction, usually war. Through the winds of war, nations change. Nations transition, often in the context or the catalyst of war. And that's the stormy winds that we're striving on the sea. Question number 3. What kingdom does the bear represent? We just read about. Well, after Babylon, we know that the next kingdom that came was the kingdom of Persia, called the Medo-Persian kingdom at first. It says it was raised up on one side, and that's because the Persian kingdom was stronger than the Median kingdom. At first, it was sort of a dual kingdom. And you can read this also in the next chapter of Daniel. It describes, you read on in the Bible, it defines and explains these visions for you. Just compare Scripture with Scripture and you can understand these things. Daniel 8:20. Number 3, what do the 3 ribs in the mouth of this bear symbolize? Well, when the bear came into power, it conquered 3 other nations. When Medo-Persia came into power, the 3 ribs, and sometimes you got to look at history to see these things. The 3 ribs represent the 3 principal powers conquered by the Medo-Persians, which were Lydia, Babylon, and Egypt. 3 ribs. Usually if you've got someone's rib in their mouth, they're not still alive anymore. These nations had been conquered. All right, question number 4. Greece, the 3rd kingdom, Daniel 8:21, tells you in the next chapter, it's Greece, is represented by a leopard with 4 wings and 4 heads. What do the heads represent? Now, when you think of the kingdom of Greece, oh, and by the way, and what do the 4 wings represent? When you think of the kingdom of Greece, we principally think of the first great king. What was his name? Alexander the Great, the king of Macedon. Well, he didn't live very long. I mean, he conquered an enormous amount of territory, marched his soldiers 22,000 miles in that brief 10 years of conquest. It was a phenomenal feat of history. But then he basically drank himself to death in Babylon, died a young man, did not leave an heir. And so the kingdom was then divided among his 4 generals. And this is exactly what history tells us. The 4 wings represent the speed with which he conquered. 4 heads, 4 generals, this one kingdom was divided among. It says in history, the 4 heads represent the 4 kingdoms into which the empire of Alexander the Great was divided when he died. The 4 generals who headed these were Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. And there you've roughly got a map that outlines the expanse of that Macedonian empire of Alexander the Great. It was the next world empire. Now I need to pause here. You might be thinking, as I once did, you mean to tell me that during the time it's talking about Babylon and Medo-Persia and Greece. There were a lot of other big empires in the world. Chinese had a great empire during that time. The Incas had a great empire. Why is it only talking about these empires in the Middle East region or around the Mediterranean? All the empires that you're going to find in Bible prophecy are the ones that specifically had some control or dominance over God's people. Babylon, Medo-Persia, Egypt, Assyria, Rome, Greece, all occupied the Promised Land. The reason it does not mention the Aztecs or the Incas or some of these other empires that may have existed wasn't because they weren't great empires. It's because they really had no domination or they did not occupy the Promised Land. All of these kingdoms did occupy Israel or the church during their time of power. Does that make sense? So these prophecies are dealing with the world powers that were controlling God's people. And you can understand that. All right, number 5. The Roman Empire is the fourth world kingdom. I hope I'm not shocking anybody with that news. Most places in the world I go, they study basic world history, and people know that. You can just look in the world around you today, and you see the influence of Rome everywhere. Number 5, well, let me back up and read this again. The Roman Empire is the fourth world kingdom. It's represented by a horrible monster with iron teeth and 10 horns. You remember the bottom of Daniel's image, chapter 2. Rome is represented by the metal of what? Iron. By the way, the Romans are the ones who sort of refined the development of iron, even beyond what the Philistines had, and that's why they conquered the Greeks. They had iron swords, and you could cut a bronze sword in two with a sharp iron sword. And so the iron implements of the Romans really gave them a military edge, and they were known as the Iron Monarchy of Rome by the historians. What do the 10 horns represent? That it says this Iron Empire had 10 horns. As the Roman Empire began to implode, it was divided into 10 kingdoms. Now you can look in Daniel 8, it tells you what the horns represent. The ram that you saw having 2 horns, they are the kings of Media and Persia, meaning these horns represent kingdoms. Keep in mind, when God gave these prophecies to the Jewish people, what was the principal occupation of the Hebrews? They're shepherds. They had a lot of goats and sheep that had horns. They offered a lot of oxen and cattle. And they just thought in those terms, and they realized that this sort of was the power of these animals. And so when they would anoint somebody with oil, they put the oil in a sacred horn, and they would pour it on someone. It meant the power of the Spirit would prepare that priest, prophet, or king. They used this sacred anointing oil. That's what the word Christ means, Christo, the anointed. And that meant the power of God would rest on this person, and they used that oil on the prophets and the priests and the kings. And when they called their sacred assemblies, they had this great ram's horn they'd blow through. And so horns represented power to them, represented a kingdom. And here I've given you a verse for that. As Rome began to disintegrate, it left 10 empires in its place. The 10 horns represent the 10 kings or kingdoms into which pagan Rome was eventually split. This is something what the old map looked like of how it's sort of divided up. And some of the names that you would recognize today for these divisions of the Roman Empire are here. They've got the Alemanni, or the Germans, the Franks, which were the French, the Burgundians were the Swiss, the Suevi, the Portuguese, the Lombards are the Italians, the Visigoths were the Spanish, the Anglo-Saxons, the English, and then you've got 3 other kingdoms that were plucked up. Remember, it says this, another horn comes and plucks up 3. And those are the kingdoms of the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths. And so the ancient Roman Empire, when it imploded because of they had too much time, too much money, too much decadence, and they basically self-destructed. They sort of fizzled off fragmented into 10 kingdoms. And you can even see the evidence of that in modern Europe today. Now consider the parallels. What we're doing, friends, is I'm giving you evidence to help you identify the Antichrist, the last day beast that we're talking about. Consider the parallels between the visions of Daniel and Revelation. We just read Daniel 7, and it talked about these animals. Animals were, lion is what country? Babylon. The bear was Medo-Persia. It's up on the screen there. The Greece, or sorry, I gave it away. The leopard was Greece, and that strange, powerful beast with iron teeth was Rome. It's sort of a nondescript beast. Now, with that in mind, look at Revelation 13, where it talks about the Antichrist beast. I stood upon the sand of the sea. I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. There you've got those 10 horns again. And upon his horns 10 crowns. That means these kingdoms had monarchies. And upon his heads the names of blasphemy. Now the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Is a leopard in Daniel 7? And his feet were like the feet of a bear. Is a bear in Daniel 7? And his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. All right, it talks about there's 4 creatures there. You got the leopard, you got the bear, you've got the lion, and then it mentions a dragon. That dragon is ultimately the devil, but you know the dragon was working through the Roman Empire. It says that, Revelation 12, it says that the dragon tried to devour this baby as soon as it was born, speaking of Jesus. You remember when Herod sent Roman soldiers into Bethlehem to kill all the babies? The devil was using the Roman power to try to destroy Christ when he was helpless. And so you've got the same powers that are mentioned there in Daniel 7 are now in Revelation chapter 13. So look at the parallels you'll see. The Babylonians were conquered by the Persians, who adopted and absorbed a lot of good things that Babylon had and kept some of their own traditions. And then the Greeks conquered the Persians, and the Greeks kept a number of good things that the Persians had. Matter of fact, Alexander wanted to move the capital to Babylon. That's why he died in Babylon. He said, between 2 rivers, great place. And then when the Romans conquered the Greeks, the Romans adopted even some of the government, the Senate. A lot of things they got from the Greeks, a lot of mythology. Roman mythology is almost identical to Greek mythology. Architecture, look at the Greek architecture, look at the Roman architecture. The educational system, a lot of things were adopted and absorbed. And history continues to operate that way. That's why this last beast sort of looks like a composite of all the other beasts, because one builds upon another and takes on certain characteristics. All right, now take a breath. You still with me? I want to make sure you're awake now, because I'm going to start telling you as straight as I know how to tell you who these beasts are in Revelation chapter 13. Look at the similarities that we see between chapter 7 and chapter 13. You got a lion, both. You got a bear in both. You got a leopard. Oop, I jumped too fast, sorry. The leopard in both, the dragon in both, 10 horns in both, a mouth speaking blasphemy or great things, war on the saints. In one, Daniel 7 says 3.5 years. In Revelation, it says makes war for 42 months. The Jews had 30 days in their month, and they had 360 days in their year. 42 months, 3.5 years, same period of time exactly. By the way, that's how long Jesus taught. 3.5 in the Bible is a number that represents an interruption or a cutting off of 7. 7's a perfect number. Half of 7 is 3.5. Christ preached and taught during a time of great persecution and rejection, so bad they finally killed him. Then the disciples taught just to the Jews for another 3.5 years, persecution, resistance, until finally Stephen was killed and they were scattered everywhere. Acts chapter 8. Elijah tried to preach the truth during a famine that lasted how long? 1,260 days, 42 months, 3.5 years. It's all the same period of time. It's half of 7 years. Got it? So, I want you to have that number in your head. Number 6. In Daniel 7, in the Daniel 7 prophecy, what happens next? And I beheld in this horn, this little horn, with eyes like the eyes of a man and a mouth speaking great things. When you read about the Antichrist power in Revelation 13, it says it's the number of a man. And earlier in the chapter it says with blasphemies. That's what great things means. It means great things against God, even prouder than God, or putting themselves above God, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. All right, number 7. So, are there clear points now that we've looked at from Revelation and from Daniel 7 that will help us to identify the Antichrist. I think there are. Tell you what, I'm not going to keep you guessing anymore. Let me tell you who these two beasts are in Revelation 13. All right. First, let me preface my statements. You know, Paul asks a question. He says, are you my enemy because I tell you the truth? It's in the Bible. Will you still be my friend if I tell you the truth? I hope so. You want the truth, don't you? Sometimes the truth hurts. You sure? It's like, you know, wife gets dressed. She says, does this dress make me look fat? Don't do that. Ladies, don't do that to your husband. All right. There are two beasts in Revelation. The first beast, and I've got a lesson coming on this, represents the Catholic power based in Rome. The second beast represents America, Protestant stronghold. You know, one reason Pope Benedict recently came to America, and I think he's also visited Sydney, hasn't he? Yeah, is because they are losing Europe to Islam right now. And their greatest allies for Christianity are across the ocean. I don't know if you've seen what the demographics are, but it's pretty serious. I am not trying to say anything derogatory about Protestants or America. I am one. You understand? Neither am I trying to say anything derogatory about Catholics or people who are part of that church. That's where I went to school, 2 different Catholic schools. Lovely people. There will be a lot of those people from both groups in heaven. Is that clear? But prophecy tells us that both the Christians based in Rome and the Christians based in the free world have apostatized in the last days. They will join together to compel people to worship a certain way. First, we're going to start in this presentation dealing with what happened in the old world, namely dealing with that first beast, which I'm telling you, I believe, represents the papacy. Let's see if the characteristics match. If I was to tell you I had a special friend in this room, and you got to guess who my special friend is, well, your chances are probably 1 out of 400. Be hard to guess. But if I said, all right, first I'll tell you it's a man. Well, that gives you a little better odds, right? Then if I give you an approximate age, that narrows it down. Then if I say what color his jacket is and what color his tie is, how tall he is, whether or not he has hair and what color it is, if I give you enough information, will you eventually be able to find who that person is? Now, by the way, I don't have anyone I'm thinking of. You're all sort of my friends. But I'm just giving you an example. You get enough information, and pretty soon, you know, all chance of misunderstanding is gone because there's just plenty of evidence. Look at the evidence that we've just seen in Daniel and Revelation to identify this first beast, and you see if it doesn't match with what happened with the Catholic Church in history and the office that the Pope holds. All right, first of all, I'm giving these to you. This is all part of answer number 7. So I give it to you in letters so you don't get confused. A, first part, or first criteria, says the little horn or kingdom came up among the other 10, meaning the 10 divisions of the Roman Empire, this power would rise up among one of them. All right, is the Catholic Church based in Italy or in Rome? Was that one of those 10 divisions of the Roman Empire? Obviously. So it would rise up among them. That's one of them. And that's obvious history, I think, to everybody. B, it would have a man at its head who could speak for it. C, it would pluck up or uproot 3 kingdoms. I'm going through these quickly. These are the things we just looked at. D, it would be diverse or different from the other 10 kingdoms. The others are military. This is a little different. E, it would make war with and wear out or persecute the saints. F, it would emerge from the pagan Roman Empire, the 4th world kingdom. G, God's people or the saints would be given into his hand for this 3.5-year prophetic period we just read about. H, it would speak great words against or blaspheme God. In Revelation 13:5, the Bible says the same power would speak great things and blasphemies. I, it would think to change times and laws. J, it would be a worldwide power. So here you've got a summary of some of the 10 points, and there's a lot more we could pick from. We're just taking 10 or 11 of the more obvious points to help identify this power. All right, let's go one by one through them and see if it works. Look at history, look at the Bible. We'll see if it matches. So who is this little horn of Daniel 7 the first beast in Revelation 13. I believe it matches up with what you would call the Roman Catholic power, the Roman Catholic Church, and the office of the Pope in particular. All right, number 8, let's look at this. Sometimes it's called the papacy. Have you heard that term before? We don't use that very often, but it's speaking of the Roman Catholic Church. Does the papacy fit these points? This is question number 8. A, first of all, it came up among the 10 kingdoms of Western Europe, which is the geographical location of the papal power that was in Rome, in Italy, the very heart of the territory of the Roman Empire. So you got these 4 world kingdoms: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome. History books are very clear. Rome would disintegrate into 10 kingdoms. From one of those 10 kingdoms, this other little horn power would rise up that grows into, ultimately, the beast power of the last days. Does the papacy fit that criteria? Everyone here realize I'm not trying to speak against anybody. We're all in this together. I'm just saying, what does the Bible prophecy teach? By the way, it shouldn't surprise you. What is the most powerful and one of the largest religions of the world and prominent in history? It's the Roman Catholic Church. It would almost surprise you if it did not appear anywhere. It's, 1,500-year history. If it didn't appear anywhere in Bible prophecy, that'd be unusual. So this shouldn't surprise anybody. It says, the dragon gave him his power and seat and great authority. We learned a minute ago this dragon represented the Roman power that the devil was operating through. The dragon in Revelation 12 is the devil working through pagan Rome. Pagan Rome is Rome ruled by the Caesars. Papal Rome is Rome ruled by the popes. It says the dragon, Rome, gave his power, seat, and authority. All right, let's look at history and see if this fits. Now, follow me very closely, please. When the Christian church first began to explode in the Roman Empire, it was illegal to be a Christian. Christianity was deemed religio illicitae, Latin for forbidden religion. That's why Peter was crucified upside down. What town did he die in? Rome. Paul was beheaded. What city was he beheaded in? Rome. The Caesars were trying to eradicate Christianity. And the devil's first plan for Christianity is, look, I'm going to see if I can just annihilate them. Genocide, execute, eliminate. But the more they persecuted the Christians, they'd feed them to the lions in Rome, they'd smother them with perch, they'd torture them, the more the church grew. So the devil went to plan B. It says, if I can't beat them, I'll join them. If I can't destroy them from the outside, I'll do it from the inside. I'll legitimize it. I'll make them complacent. I'll do it through compromise. And so along came a Roman emperor we talked about the other day by the name of Constantine. He found it would be politically correct to legalize Christianity because the Christian religion was spreading all through the empire. Those of you, have you been to Rome? Rome is just absolutely honeycombed. I met a gentleman from Rome here tonight. Rome is honeycombed with catacombs. Why? Because the whole Christian world moved underground. And Constantine realized, look, the Christians are pretty peaceful. They're not hurting anybody. We're actually more moral than the pagans. We need to probably legalize it. And he found some things attractive about it. And so it was a very smart political move for him not only to legalize Christianity, but he claimed to convert to Christianity later in his life. Never was baptized that we know of. And here's what history said. Oh, by the way, you know what he did? He actually ordered his whole army. He says, look, we're going to legalize Christianity. Matter of fact, I'm ordering my whole army to march through the Tiber River and you're all going to be baptized. Well, is that how Jesus grew the church? You just order all these pagans, no teaching at all, to march through a river and say you're now Christians? They had no idea what that meant. And so all of these pagan soldiers marched into the Tiber River. They went in dry pagans and they came up wet pagans, but they were calling them Christians. And then there were all these pagan priests that said, hey, I don't want to lose my job. The emperor's just become a Christian. I think I'm going to convert and keep my job. And so all these pagan priests started converting, and they said, but what do we do with all our statues to all the Greek and Roman gods? They said, well, give them Christian names. And friends, I'm not kidding. This is exactly what happened. All over Rome, there were statues of Apollo and Zeus and Mercury and Diana. And they said, well, what do we call them? Now, Peter, James, John, Paul, and Mary. And all of a sudden, they began idolatry instantly, almost overnight, began to fall into the church because they just baptized all these pagans started coming in, and they weren't being taught the Ten Commandments. And a lot of compromises started to happen, where in Catholicism today, you see a little bit of commingling of Christianity with whatever the local pagan countries happen to believe. If you go to Mexico, the Catholics there celebrate something called the Day of the Dead. It's nowhere in the Bible, but it's a pretty ghoulish celebration. And you go down to Central America and the different parts of the world. I've been in Africa, and the Catholics there, they kind of mingle some of their pagan rituals with Catholicism. And it made an allowance for this. Well, that's what happened. It started with Constantine. Roman emperor then gave power to and a seat to the Bishop of Rome. If you look in Abbott's Roman History, page 236, it says the transfer of the residents to Constantinople was a sad blow to the prestige of Rome. And at that time, one might have predicted its speedy decline. Constantine decided to move the capital of the Roman Empire further east to Constantinople. That's where it gets its name, named after Constantine the Great. Everyone would have thought Rome was just going to start turning into a village after that. But listen to what the historian said. But the development of the church and the growing authority of the Bishop of Rome, or the Pope, gave her a new lease on life and made her again the capital, this time the religious capital of the world. Now, where in the Bible did God ever set up Rome as the city where the capital was to be? In the Bible, they had their councils in Jerusalem. And by the way, it doesn't say that Peter was the first chairman of the board. If you go to the Council of Jerusalem, James, the brother of Jesus, was chairing those board meetings. And Paul wrote most of the New Testament, not Peter. And so there's a lot of confusion about these different roles. Again, reading from history. The succession of the Caesars came, to the succession of the Caesars came the succession of the pontiffs in Rome. When Constantine left Rome, he gave his seat to the pontiff. This is right out of history. It says that this power would receive its seat and authority from the dragon. Well, that's just what happened. When the emperor of Rome, when the pagan emperor left town, he said to the Bishop of Rome, he said, look, I'll give you an army. You're in charge now. He said, I'm moving. And all of a sudden, the church now had military and political power, where it was just meant to be an ecclesiastical entity. It said in the prophecy, the beast would receive its power, seat, and authority from Rome. That's exactly what happened. The second thing we're exploring, B, it said it would have a man at the head who speaks for it. The papacy meets this identifying mark because it does have one man at the head, the Pope, who speaks for it. It says, all power was given to him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations. Where do you ever see the United Nations gather together to hear Billy Graham address them? You all know who Billy Graham is here in Australia? Just make sure. I don't want to assume that you know everything that we're doing in America. But would the General Assembly of the United Nations gather together for any other pastor? But they have frequently called a session to be addressed by the Pope. I think that's significant. The Pope is the undisputed leader of the Catholic Church. Nobody contends that. One man, it said, would be at the head. It's not a council. It's not a board that operates it or a committee. One man. See, it would pluck up or uproot 3 kingdoms when it came into power. History fits this description perfectly too. The 3 Arian kingdoms that did not support the papacy, namely the Vandals, the Heruli, and the Ostrogoths, were all attacked by the armies of Rome and overthrown, right about the same time that they received an army from the Roman emperor. And so it meets that criteria. You ever heard the word vandalism? See, the Vandals, they weren't all bad. The Vandals were outraged. They were Christians. And they said, it's not right that now all the Christians in Rome are praying to these old pagan statues. And they would go charging off through the Roman Empire, and they would be cutting off the heads of these statues and the arms. Have you ever been to a museum? You see all these Greek statues, and they got no arms and heads. And that's where we get the word vandalism. Because the Vandals said, it's idolatry. Why are they all praying to these statues? And they're giving these pagan statues Christian names. Little amazing fact for you. If you go to St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, they've got the statue of St. Peter there. Do you know the statue of St. Peter in Rome is older than St. Peter? It is an absolute fact. It used to be in the temple of Apollos, and when that temple fell down, they brought it in, and they put it in St. Peter's Basilica. They named it Peter, and people have actually kissed the foot off that statue several times. You can find this in National Geographic. And so it's a very old statue. It said it would uproot a three, and it did that. When this little horn came into power, 3 other kingdoms were uprooted at the same time. D, it would be diverse or different from the other kingdoms. The papacy came on the scene as a religious power. It was totally different from the secular nature of the other kingdoms. See, the other kingdoms, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, even Rome, they were ruled by emperors, by kings, monarchs. But with the Catholic Church, now you've got something where it is a religious power primarily that has some military power, at least during the Dark Ages they did. And so it is diverse in that it's not just saying that we will control you politically, it's saying we will control your souls. Any of you ever play chess? I used to play chess by the hour. I don't have time anymore. Next to the king and the queen, what are the pieces? Bishops. You know, that game came through the Middle Ages when there was an extremely powerful influence of Rome in all of the empires there in Europe. They had bishops counseling the king and the queen. And it was a very powerful position. As a matter of fact, some kings used to wait for an audience with the Pope. You've read this in history before. The kings were waiting for an audience. Any of you see the funeral of John Paul II? I saw one photograph where you've got 4 American presidents kneeling at his funeral before his casket. That's very interesting. But you will never see a pope come to America for a president's funeral. Am I right? It's a very one-way relationship there. The papacy came on the scene as a religious power and was totally different from the secular nature of the other 10 kingdoms. The Vatican is an independent country. I shared that with you in our amazing fact today. Answer E. It would make war with and persecute the saints. It says in Revelation 13, and it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. Daniel and Revelation says that during this period of power, that it would be a persecuting entity. It is a well-known fact that the church did persecute. The papacy clearly admits doing it. Matter of fact, some historians estimate that between 538 and 1798, somewhere between 20 and 40 million people were killed effectively by the church. And if you pull out the history books, it's in Encyclopedia Britannica, and you might be thinking, well, Encyclopedia Britannica, it might have a biased influence. Look at any other history. You can go to the Catholic Encyclopedia, and you'll even find admission there. They say they never condoned it. It was done by zealous members, and it was never approved of, but it's a fact of history. Answer F. It would emerge from the 4th kingdom of iron, the pagan Roman Empire. We really covered that already. That, it says that these waters that it came from represents multitudes of people. The Roman power came up from the civilizations of the Mediterranean, which was one of the most civilized places or populated places in the world at the time, the Roman Empire. It says the papacy arose from the center of civilization. That's exactly what the prophecy said. That's exactly what happened. Answer G. God's people, or the saints, would be given into his hand for a time and at times in the dividing of time. Now, a time in the Jewish writings represents a complete cycle of the season, was called a time. That meant one cycle of the world around the sun, that's a time, a year. A times, it really means a couple or a pair of times. You got one, a time. A pair of times is what? 2, that's 3. And dividing, or half of a time, 3.5. See how that works? So it uses 3 or 4 different terms in the Bible to describe 3.5 years. Calls it 3.5 years, calls it a time, a times, and the dividing of time, calls it 42 months, and it calls it 1,260 days. It's all the exact same thing. It's 3.5 years. So how does that fit in with the prophecy? And power was given unto him to continue 42 months. 42 months, 1,260 years, 42 Jewish months, 30 days in a Jewish month. The legally recognized supremacy of the Pope began in 538 AD. You got that date down? When there went into effect a decree of the Emperor Justinian, making the Bishop of Rome the official head over all the churches. Up until that time, the Pope was not technically the head of all the churches in Rome. They had bishops all different parts of the Roman Empire. They said the Bishop of Rome is now the Supreme Father. And Justinian basically left town and gave him an army. So he now had military power as well. Vigilus ascended the papal chair in 538 AD under the military protection of Basilius. That's a History of the Christian Church, Volume 3. So if you start at 538 and you add 42 months. Oh, I forgot to tell you something. Some of you were here earlier, and you know this, but some may be here for the first time. In Bible prophecy, what does a day equal? Do you remember? A year. And there's several verses. I've given you at least 3 verses for that. When interpreting Bible prophecy, a day equals a year. And so when it says 1,260 days, 42 months, 3.5 years, it's all 1,260 days. We translate that to be 1,260 years. If you start at 538 and you go 1,260 years, where do you come to? It reaches to 1798. Very interesting time in history. Have you heard about a real short French guy named Napoleon? You know, France was one of the first countries to sort of openly declare atheism. Every other empire of the world had some form of religion. France, during the French Revolution, burned Bibles in the streets, and they openly said that there is no God, God is dead, and it really became an atheistic country. To this day, it is very hard to do Christian Bible work in France. So Napoleon, in 1798, he actually sent his army into Rome, and they arrested the Pope. And the power was basically broken that had been uninterrupted for 1,260 years. Here it is from history, Encyclopedia America. I hope you don't think the American Encyclopedia is suspect. You'll also find this in the Britannica. In 1798, he, Berthier, this is the French general of Napoleon, he made his intro.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, with the Bachelor tapes, it hasn't got a halfway point, so we'll just have to keep record of where we are and continue on next week for the second half. So we'll have an interlude now, and afterwards we'll start with Walter Veith. Thank you very much.